الخير، ازيكم عاملين ايه؟ شريف بكر معاكم من العربي النشر والتوزيع. احنا معانا النهارده الكاتبه النرويجيه إيريكا فاتلاند. إيريكا انا كنت قابلتها سنه 2016 في استونيا، كنا في مهرجان ادبي وتعرفت عليها وتعرفت على كتاباتها. هي كانت شخصيه مختلفه قوي، كانت بتسيب الجروب حتى اللي احنا كنا فيه كله، وكانت بتحب تروح تلف وتتعرف على البلد. ده كان 2016. الزمن لف، وعلى 2020 او 2019 في فرانكفورت لقيت كان ضيف الشرف فنلندا، وكانت هي اللي بتقدم فنلندا، كلمه فنلندا في الافتتاح بتاع المعرض. ومن الحقيقه قالت كلام وكلمت في حاجه كانت مثيره جدا، وطريقتها كانت مختلفه جدا. هنتناقش معاها في ده دلوقتي. واكتشفت ان عندها كتب ترافل بوكس، كتب سفر، ودي حاجه احنا مش عندنا في العالم العربي قوي، ان الناس بتتكلم على السفر، مش عارف ليه. بس لقيت ان هي كتبها مختلفه خالص، طريقتها مختلفه في التناول، طريقتها في الكتابه مختلفه، في قصص كتيره بتتكلم عنها في البلاد. وكان اول كتاب احنا قررنا نترجمه لها كان كتاب سوفيتستان، وهو كل الدول التي كانت محتلة بالاتحاد السوفيتي واستقلت وآخر اسمها ستان. فهم 5 دول. كتاب معانا هو ورا، فين ده؟ كتاب اهو، خارج من المطبعة قريبا جدا. فراحت لتركمستان، كازاخستان، طاجكستان، قرغيزستان، وأوزبكستان. الحقيقه الواحد يعني كان فاكر ان هو عارف عن البلاد دي، بس طلع ان احنا تقريبا ما نعرفش حاجه خالص. وهي قدمت صوره مختلفه خالص، مثيره جدا، بقصص كتيره مختلفه عن كل بلد من البلاد دي. وده اللي شجعنا ان احنا نعمل معاها انترفيو، نتكلم فيه عن الكتاب ده ونناقشها معاها. هنبتدي الانترفيو الاول نتعرف عليها، وبعد كده نبتدي. شكرا. So first, could you introduce us to the readers? Because we have here, I know that you are born in Norway, of course. You started writing for children. Erika Fatland started to write children books. And then you started your nonfiction in 2000 and The Village of Angels, The Terror Attack in Bestland. She started her travel books. We have in Arabic her first book, which is Sovietistan. We have it here. We were testing covers, but this is the final version where she visited Turkmenistan, Kazakhstan, Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, and Uzbekistan. And then after the big success of this book, she did her second book, I think, in this series. If it's a series, if we consider it, it's called Borders, when she traveled the 14 countries that surrounds the ex-USSR or the Russian borders. And it has a very interesting story that we'll do another video about this as well. But we'll start first with Sovietistan. A woman from Norway, what interests her to travel to these countries? What's so intriguing for you to do such a trip?
Okay, so Russia is a neighbor country to Norway, but Russia is a very, very different country from Norway. So I have been fascinated with Russia as long as I can remember. I find it a very, very interesting, different world. And well, not only Russia, but the whole former Soviet USSR. And I remember when I went to school, well, the Soviet Union didn't exist any longer when I went to school in the 90s, but the maps that we had in our school were old maps, so we could still see the USSR. And I was just so fascinated by how big it was. I mean, it's enormous. It goes all the way from Estonia to the Pacific Ocean. And then when I started traveling in Russia and in the Caucasus to write my first book about Bestland, I realized that, of course, Russia and the USSR are so much more than just Russians. There were so many different people living in the USSR. And it dawned upon me that the people who were probably most different culturally from Russians were the people living in Central Asia. So they spoke very different language, Turkish language and Persian language. many of them were nomads. They were Muslims, not Orthodox Christians, and so on. But still, these people in the 1920s became part of the big experiment that the Soviet Union was.
Mm-hmm.
And then in 1991, these countries became independent, and we have heard very, very little from them. So I was curious, like, what came out on the other side? What are these countries like today? And the reason why I chose the title, Sovietistan, is that I was interested to find out how being part of the Soviet Union had like affected those countries and the people living there.
Okay, and the most famous question that you get is like traveling as a woman alone on the road in these countries and other countries. Wasn't a bit you weren't a bit scared, or I don't know.
Well, that is
I would be very
most common
scared
question.
going to these countries, doing what you've done. I wouldn't have the courage to do all this. I think at some point I might think of going back, but you went even to dry seas and to nuclear places. These are really crazy places to go. I mean,
Yeah,
I
did
commend
go
you
to
for
a
that.
few places. And being a woman traveling alone, if that's not very dangerous, that is the most common question that I get. And then there are two things to say. First, I would say that the countries in Central Asia are probably among the safest countries in the world to travel. And part of this is that these countries are, most of them, authoritarian. Some of them are very authoritarian, like Turkmenistan and Uzbekistan. Turkmenistan is more or less like North Korea. It's very, very authoritarian, ruled by a dictator. And then traveling in authoritarian regimes has this upside that is generally very safe. There are police everywhere, there are cameras everywhere, and all crime is mostly committed by the president and his closest family and friends. So generally, you have very little crime in those countries. And then secondly, well, I would say that wherever I travel in the world, people are generally very friendly, very welcoming. I would say the world is kinder. People are kinder than you usually think. And the people in Central Asia, they are very known for their hospitality. So I was generally welcomed warmly. So I would say that it's not a disadvantage to travel as a woman. I think it's an advantage because a male traveler, especially maybe in more traditional societies, in Muslim societies, a man will often not have access to the world of the women. And I especially noticed this when I was traveling in even more traditional societies like Pakistan, where my interpreter and guide would often have to sit outside the house, but I could come inside and I could also talk to the women. So I would say it's an advantage to travel as a woman.
But you were not afraid. You were felt always secure. There was no time where things were like, what am I doing here? I mean, should I go back?
Of course, there were times when I was afraid for many reasons. In Turkmenistan, for instance, I mean, I did not, to get a visa to be able to enter Turkmenistan, I could have not, of course, not write that I was a writer, I was planning to write a book. They would never let me in. And they even demanded to see a certificate from my employer where I was working to make sure I was not a journalist.
Did you use the slaughterhouse as well?
Yeah, I told them I was working in the slaughterhouse. I usually do.
Receptionist at the slaughterhouse?
Family runs the slaughterhouse.
اعتدنا.
Myself, I'm a vegetarian. So I was, of course, afraid that they would find out that I was really a writer, because then I would not know how the regime would react, if they would arrest me or what they would do. So I was very nervous about this. And of course, what is most dangerous in most countries is the traffic, is getting into a car. And then, of course, then being a solo woman traveling, having sometimes to get into a car with a man that you don't know and you just have to trust him. Of course, sometimes I'm a little bit nervous. And when you're sitting in the car, you don't know if this is going to end well or not. Now that I'm sitting here, I can tell you everything went fine. I had no problems. But of course, while traveling, there are times when I'm nervous.
Okay. I know that you speak 8 languages. Can you count them?
Okay. So I went to school in France. I speak French. And then I learned Spanish and some Italian. Now I'm trying to learn Portuguese for another book project. Then I speak Russian, of course, which was very useful for writing Sovietistan. And German. وأنا أدرس العربية.
Oh, really? That's really good. So you can talk to us maybe. This would have been my last question, but no, I would have to ask it in the beginning. Would you, think of coming to the Arab world doing something like this? Would it be the Arab world? Would it be one country? Would it be?
Well, I am thinking about a project related to the Arab world, which is why I'm learning Arabic now. But Arabic is extremely difficult. So
Wow.
I'm just, I know I will need a lot of years before I will be able to communicate in Arabic. So I've just started, and hopefully one day I will be able to travel in the Arab world and talk in Arabic.
Would you take the whole Arab world as one trip, like borders and like Sovietistan, or would you go for each and every country alone or something?
I haven't decided yet. The Arab world is very big, so maybe
and very different. You'll be amazed.
Sure.
You'll be amazed how different it is, even if you speak the same language, kind of. But yeah, it's totally different, left to right, east to west. That's completely different. So to tell you the truth, when we started reading Sovietistan, the first scene when you were going in the plane and you have the ladies carrying stuff with the Turkish Airlines and trying to, I was afraid of a condescending look at this trip, because you come from the north, you come from Norway, it's very safe, it's very, you have these established things already, so there's no, you have this look from up to the people. But finishing the book, I would say that you were very fair. You were as much possible objective as you can, not subjective towards this situation, with your own also opinion, which is very much the matter. Did you feel there are these differences between North and West, between South and North, North and South, and stuff like that? Did you feel that it is a big problem? Things should change, or did it change your mind in a way, or how did you see this?
Well, I always try to travel with a very open mind. So I don't do a lot of research before I travel. Of course, I do some research to get a visa and to make an itinerary, but I try to not know. I think it's an advantage to not know too much before traveling, because then you take everything in and you don't have too many opinions that will shape what you see. So I always write my books after finishing the research trip. So it's always just based on what I experience on the road. And well, as of education, I'm a social anthropologist. So as a social anthropologist as well, you learn how to be open, how you also learn a lot about how you may be shaped by your own culture and upbringing, and then you try to take off those glasses as you travel. As far as that is possible.
What did it change in your mind? What did you think, or had a perception, and then after traveling you said, no, I shouldn't do this? Or let's make it more general, or the European or Norwegian or Scandinavian mind have all these stereotypes? Because we as publishers, one of our mission, I think, and the reason we started all this series of all these books translated from now 57 countries is to change the stereotype, because I always face stereotyping when I travel. people think of me as this Egyptian, blah, blah, blah. And I always say, no, you should know better, you should read, you should. And I discovered that we have ourselves already stereotyped the Scandinavian, the Germans, the Latin Americans. So I started doing this series based on the idea of, let's also think that we're not right always, or we're not see things as we are. So if you have this vision and you would say something to the European side, what would you say? Like, stop doing this?
No, I'm not a big fan of telling people what to do or how to think, but I do think it's very important that people travel for themselves, that they go out and see the world, and that people go to not only to tourist places where you have all this tourist infrastructure and you just see your hotel or your swimming pool, but that you, when you travel, that you try to meet people and try to go out of the cities to see how people live outside of the cities. And I think then you will discover that the world is, first of all, much bigger than you might think. I mean, today we say that the world is getting smaller and smaller, but I mean, the world is as big as it has always been, but people travel, more and more people travel to the same places. So I would encourage people to go to other kind of places as well. And then people are generally very kind. People are generally very hospitable, very eager to get to know other people. So I would say that, I mean, the question you started asking me was if it's not very dangerous to travel alone in the world as a woman. And I would say that now, in general, the world is a safer place and a nicer place than you might think when just watching the news.
Exactly, that's really true. I remember in the opening speech at the Frankfurt Book Fair when Finland was when Norway was guest of honor, you came out and you spoke to your prime minister. Do you remember the incident? Would you like shed a light? Because this was like, I came to you after that and I was really astonished for this to happen in an international scene. This would never happen in our part of the world, and it would be considered treason if you do something like this. So would you shed a light for our readers to say, I mean, we can talk more about the book and we'll talk about the book, but I like also to show the human side of who wrote the book. It's more important, I think, because everybody will read the book and will enjoy it, I'm sure.
Hopefully. Okay, so in 2019, Norway was guest of honor in Frankfurt, and I had the honor of giving the speech from the author. And I thought a lot about this speech because, of course, you can say a lot of nice things about freedom of speech, and everyone who had spoken before me, all of them men, German men in suits, and they all said very nice things about the free speech. And but what is free speech? I think free speech is you can, if you just talk nicely about it, it doesn't really mean anything. You have to use it. Mm-hmm. And in my speech, I criticized a lot of countries. I criticized China. I criticized North Korea, and of course it's very easy for a Norwegian to be on a stage in Frankfurt and to criticize North Korea. It doesn't cost me anything. But of course, since Norway was guest of honor, our prime minister was also present, and I felt this was a good opportunity to talk to her and tell her directly and criticize her directly for a mistake I felt that she had made. And that was, I mean, it's a long story. I'll try to make it short. But there was a small theater in Oslo who had earlier made a theater piece where they tried to criticize powerful people. And then as part of this performance, they had filmed houses of these people, but from a distance and so on. It was all part of a performance. And then the wife of one of the ministers who had been filmed, she was very angry about this. She made a lot of trouble. And then our prime minister told journalists in a press meeting that this small theater should also think about what they do. So in general, what she did, she was interfering in what art, what theater, a small theater would make. And I think as a powerful person, you should never kick down. You should, as a prime minister, you should step apart. You should never interfere with what artists are doing, because art should be free, speech should be free. And as a prime minister, you're not a neutral person, you are a powerful person. So I took the opportunity in Frankfurt to criticize her directly for doing that, for interfering in free speech, because free speech is not something you have automatically. It's something you have to fight for every day. And I feel that today, free speech all over the world, also in the Western world, is under threat. You have a tendency, I feel, that a pressure to become correct, that you should, in a book, you should be so correct that it would maybe interfere with how you feel free to write. And now there is even this ugly tendency that we tend to go back in time and correct and censor writers and artists who wrote in the past for not living up to our moral standards today.
Exactly.
So I think you have to fight every day for freedom of speech.
You know that I'm a member of the Freedom of Speech, Freedom to Publish Committee at the IPA, at the International Publishers Association, and we always came across cases from all around the world where writers have really problems up to prison, or they are harassed somehow, and we try to help them. But when you came back to Norway, did anything happen? Did you get any comments in the news from the Prime Minister? Anything?
No, and that is, of course, the wonderful thing about being a Norwegian writer, that we do actually have freedom of speech. And I knew I would not really risk that my books would not be published. I knew that there would not be any serious consequences for me, like maybe an Egyptian writer would have a risk if that person did something like that on an international
I think in so many countries as well. In so many countries as well.
Most of the countries.
Yeah. So nothing happened. I mean, this was not even praised by the newspapers, by the journalists. I mean, they didn't discuss.
No. I made it to the evening television news.
Nice.
And I got some angry messages on my phone from people who were shocked, feeling one should not criticize the prime minister like that. But mostly the reactions I got were like good reactions. People felt it was good not only to talk about freedom of speech, but to use it.
Because we had the same here in Egypt, but with a Swiss author. He was here at the book fair and he criticized Switzerland, and the ambassador was sitting there, and people were shocked that he's doing this with the ambassador sitting, and the ambassador came out and he said, we need this actually criticism to correct us all the time. So that was like an experience for the audience, that you can really practice this and not to be, you know, thrown under the bus or anything. Okay, back to your book. Out of the first, all the Stan's countries, what really was fascinating for you? I mean, for me, was this disappearing sea. That was like, first, it's a brand new information I didn't know anything of. And then it's like, is it possible that a sea would disappear and you would walk? I mean, I know that with the global warming and everything, things are changing, but I mean, it's not disappearing. This is like really frightening. Could you shed a light on this part specifically, if you remember still?
Yeah. So you're talking about the Aral Sea. Aral Sea used to be the fourth biggest lake it's kind of a lake ocean in the world. And it was a very important lake for Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan, who are both landlocked countries. So they have no coastline. And then during the Soviet regime, and I think this is also a story that tells a lot about how the Soviet regime was thinking, because the Aral Sea disappearing, it's not because of global warming, it's because of direct interference from human beings, and it was planned. They knew that the lake would disappear, and they didn't care. Because for the reason why the Russians and the Soviets were interested in particularly Uzbekistan was that for them this was a very good soil, good climate to produce cotton. Because in Russia it's too cold, and they wanted to be self-supplied with cotton. Now they had the sun, they had the climate for cotton, but cotton needs a lot of water, and they did not have enough water naturally in Uzbekistan. Yeah. Of course, you produce cotton as well in Egypt.
Yeah.
So what they did was that they took the rivers leading to the Aral Lake, and they diverted them that direction and took this water to the cotton fields instead. And then they knew that with time, the Aral Lake, the Aral Sea would disappear, and they didn't care. So today, traveling in the Aral Lake, where the Aral Lake used to be, it's very sad because you're just traveling on this ground that used to be sea, and that today is very, very poisonous. The people who live in this area today, many of them are sick and ill because of the dust and the poison from the...
Yeah, that must be an ecological disaster there, yes. Removing something like this would affect the whole nature. I mean, animals, plants, and people as well. Wow, that's really interesting. You were talking about Dashnabi is the most beautiful capital of the Central Asia. Is it true? Is it?
You mean Dushanbe, the capital of
Dushanbe, yeah. Yes.
It's a very nice capital. It's very green. It's not very big, so it's pleasant to walk around. Well, but I know that today it's quickly changing. They are now, after I was there, they have tore down a lot of the old Soviet buildings, and they are building new and bigger buildings. So I can't really tell if it's as pleasant to travel there today as when I was there.
Because it was very fashionable to have this old Russian building. It's like the Berlin, the East Berlin, West Berlin. The East Berlin is very like hip to be in this old buildings. You like them as well? Okay.
The old buildings of Berlin.
Yes.
Well, the buildings in Dushanbe were cuter. They were not so big, so that's what I liked about Dushanbe.
Okay. And green, as you said, and green is always nice. Okay, one last question before we move on. I'm known to be a very good eater around the world, and we try to eat as much as we can different dishes. And you had a lot of drinks, different flavors, and different food and different dishes. I know that some countries are really nice and can be very, how do you say, new experience in food and fusions of food. And some are very not so great when you start to taste them. Could you tell us what's the best and worst out of this?
Okay, I'll start with the worst. If you go to Turkmenistan, and I think you should because it's a very fascinating country, then it might be an idea to say that you're allergic to camel milk. I don't know if you drink camel milk in Egypt.
No, we eat the liver or the meat sometimes. But you're vegetarian. I know that you don't eat any meat.
In Turkmenistan, no. But in Turkmenistan, they drink camel's milk, but it's not fresh camel's milk that they're drinking. It's fermented, and this is they drink it every day. The children drink it, the grown-ups drink it. Everyone drinks it all the time. So it's really kind of the national drink. And I remember my guide, because in Turkmenistan you have to travel with a guide. He was so happy when we went to a village, and he said, here they have the best camel's milk in Turkmenistan. And of course they are very hospitable in Turkmenistan, extremely hospitable. So the host, she brought me a big bowl of camel's milk, and I was
Wow.
watching these clumpy masses, and the smell was just terrible. But of course, I mean, I had to drink it to be polite, and I tried not. How do they make this camel's milk? And he told me, well, we put camel's milk in a room, so not in a fridge, in a room, and then we keep it there for a year, and then we drink it.
A year? Oh my God. That's
A
me.
year.
That's not poisonous. I mean, it has all kind of bacteria.
And a quiet taste.
Wow.
Well, let's see. It was a.
Wow, that's really expensive. Okay, this is the worst. What about the best?
Okay, so the best, I would say, actually, I mean, I'm very fond of fruit. So they have so much good fruit in Central Asia because it's a hot region and they can grow everything themselves. So you get the best fruit. And for me as a Norwegian, where we have this cold climate and we have to import all of the fruits, and when they reach Norway, they don't taste anything, but they cost a fortune. So for me, it was just a feast to be able to eat this fresh, delightful fruit every day.
You love this here. We were just discussing yesterday that in Egypt, and I think it has to do with the sun and the weather and the Nile and the ground and everything, we have a very tasteful. I mean, they don't look like what you see in Europe, because in Europe, they're all the same size, same color. You feel that it looks perfect, but it's tasteless. Here, you will find like small, big, you know, deformed a little bit, but it's very tasty. And the juice coming out of it is also very tasty and fresh. I mean, you can, someone told me once, you can taste the sun in the fruit or in the tomatoes even or stuff. So that would be your next step. And by the way, in Egypt, it's also, as we like, and that's the tradition, we eat all kinds of meat, whether it's cow, camel, pigeons, chicken, anything. We eat everything we can eat, but also it's a haven for vegetarians, because we have a lot of things done by beans, by aubergine. We do it in so many formats that you would love. And I think you will have maybe a cookery book next, would be about this interesting part of the world also. And we would love to see you in Egypt or the Arab world. I mean, past Corona, you would be most welcome. And we would try to show you a little bit what we know. And then you maybe will show us more of the way you explore things, because you get, I don't know, I'm sure if you do a travel like this, you will tell me more about things I don't know about Egypt. And I would love to know this from you and your beautiful writing.
Thank you. And it's a long dream for both me and my husband to visit Egypt. So I really hope that we will be able to visit Egypt very soon.
You have your family here, you have your friends, and hopefully when the book out as well, you will have your fans. So people will maybe recognize you, and because the photo also is at the back. So maybe people will know you and will be careful talking to you when you travel. But then you will be speaking Arabic then. So there will be no problem. Would you like to say something at the end in Arabic for your Arabic readers?
Oh, I didn't prepare anything.
Spontaneous.
واللغة العربية لغة جميلة جدا.
Wow, that's good. You have a Syrian Lebanese accent a little bit, but that's really nice also. We totally understand.
From Amman.
Amman, oh, that Jordanian then, that's very good. So you're most welcome here whenever things starts to open and your Arabic gets better, and your book will be out very soon. People can buy it everywhere, and hopefully we'll see you here soon. And also your next book, Borders, is on its way, finished translation and in the editorial. And thank you very much, Erika Fatland from Norway. And we'll see you in another video also about Borders, your other book, which is even more countries. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.